All right, so the last type of disorders that we're going to be talking about are personality disorders. So personality disorders are linked to your personality, so therefore they can't be cured. They are on a continuum where you can have a very severe form of personality disorder and a not so severe form. So the goal of therapy with personality disorders is to move you from severe to less severe. All right, but you will always have this disorder. It won't ever go away, but you can learn how to manage it better. So there's all different types of personality disorders all over the place. Linked personality, there's narcissistic personality disorder. There's, like I said, that obsessive compulsive personality disorder. There's just a bunch of them. So I'm going to talk about kind of two of the more common ones and ones that you may have heard of before, and kind of what they look like and how we can kind of help with them. So personality disorders are persistent, rigid, maladaptive behaviors that interfere with normal social interaction. So when you have a personality disorder, it's very difficult to have healthy relationships with other people. And it affects kind of your ability to live in society as everyone else does. Now, it doesn't necessarily make your life bad, but it can make the life of those around you difficult, which then makes it a disorder, right? If people don't want to be around you, if you're making everyone else's life around you more difficult, harder, more traumatized because of your personality, then, or your personality disorder, then that's a problem. Even if you don't feel it's a problem for everybody else. So that's difficult because most people with it are like, well, what? I'm fine. I'm happy. This doesn't bother me any. Well, okay, but it's bothering everybody else, and it's hurting the people that you supposedly, say that you love. So some personality disorders are more prevalent in one gender or the other. And so I'm going to talk about one that's more of a female personality disorder and one that tends to be more of a male personality disorder, but they all can be found in both genders and sexes. They can be found in any one, but some tend to be found more in females and some tend to be found more in males. So antisocial personality disorder is a personality disorder that does tend to be found more in males. It used to be called sociopathy, people that we say are sociopaths. But then we changed it to a nicer sounding name of antisocial personality disorder. People with this disorder don't really have any morals or a conscience at all. So nothing really makes them feel bad about if they do something bad, they don't feel bad about it. They tend to be impulsive. They don't really care about consequences. And one of the main characteristics of people with antisocial personality disorder is they don't have any empathy. So when we have empathy is what helps us to feel other people's feelings, right? We talked about empathy and kind of mirror neurons, right, and learning through observation. Well, that comes into play here, where people with antisocial personality disorder lack empathy. They don't feel. When they see someone, get hurt, they don't feel it. When they see someone, having joy, they don't feel the joy as well. Like, they don't connect on that emotional level with other people. People with antisocial personality disorder can also be extremely charming. Like, they are really good at getting people to like them, and then they tend to use those people to get what they want, right? Because they don't care. They don't care if they hurt people, and because they don't have empathy and they can't really connect with people on an emotional level, they don't really have any really close relationships that mean anything to them. It may mean something to the other people, right? Other people may love them. Other people may feel, things towards them, but they don't feel anything in return for those people. They really only focus on themselves and what they want. So people with antisocial personality disorder can make, really good, CEOs of corporations. Because if, you find out if we lay off, 100,000 people, the day before Christmas, we can make, $10 million more dollars. I'll be like, okay, let's do it. Because, firing this many people right before Christmas doesn't bother me at all. I have no conscience. I have no morals. I don't care how many people I hurt. I don't care how many people I have to stab in the back to get what I want. It doesn't bother me in the least. So you can see how that behavior is not conducive with society, but how the person themselves doesn't really think of it as a problem because it doesn't really affect them. Pretty much every serial killer ever has been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, because to be able to, murder a bunch of people, you pretty much can't have feelings towards them, right? And a lot of people who are serial killers led kind of semi-normal lives. They were married, had kids, right? Or, the people are always like, oh, he was such a nice guy, and oh, blah, blah, because they're charming. They're really good at getting people to believe them and to, manipulate them. So if you have antisocial personality disorder, it doesn't mean you're going to be a serial killer. It doesn't mean that you're going to, be this horrible person. But you do kind of have to work harder at knowing how your behaviors affect others, and that it can make other people upset. And you won't really care if it makes them upset or not, but you can have a logical understanding that hurting people is wrong and that you shouldn't do it, even though it doesn't cause you to feel anything when you do it, if that makes sense. So it's an interesting disorder. Usually we see signs of it. We don't diagnose this until someone's over the age of 18, but we can usually see signs of it beforehand in what's called conduct disorder, which is a diagnosis we give to younger children. And it's pretty much the same thing, just in younger kids. If a kid gets a diagnosis of conduct disorder, like that's a huge bad red flag for that kid. But antisocial personality disorder a lot of times manifests from children who did not have good childhoods and weren't shown empathy as kids. And so that kind of manifested in their personality of never knowing how to feel empathy. So those mirror neurons are never triggered. There's also a newer theory that some people with antisocial personality disorder may actually be on the autism spectrum, because part of autism is an inability to kind of connect emotionally with other people. So the two may have an underlying kind of comorbidity there. That's kind of some newer research that people are looking at right now. All right, so borderline personality disorder is a disorder that is mostly a female disorder. Again, males can have it. There's female sociopaths. There's male borderline, people with borderline personality disorder, but it mostly manifests itself in females. So with borderline personality disorder, there's kind of a moodiness, so it kind of swings back and forth, kind of like bipolar disorder, but not as severe. An unstableness to personality, an unclear sense of identity, and an extreme clinginess to other people. So girls with borderline personality disorder don't really tend to know who they are. They don't really have a solid sense of what their own personal identity is, so they latch onto other people to tell them who they are. So females with this disorder tend to, as soon as they can have a boyfriend, and they never don't have a boyfriend. As soon as someone breaks up with them, they are with someone else like immediately within a day or two. They get married, they get divorced. Before the divorce even goes through, they're already engaged to be with somebody else. They don't know how to be alone. They don't know how to be their own person. And so they kind of take on the personality of their partner, whoever that partner may be. They also tend to have these very love-hate relationships with people. They love you or they hate you, and they may love you at 9 a.m. and hate you at 10 a.m. and then love you again at noon. Right? And so they get in huge fights with their friends. All right? You're the worst. I hate you so much. You're the worst. And then, oh my God, I love you so much. I'm so sorry. I love you. I love you. I love you. These big kind of back and forth, very moody, unstable ways of dealing with people. So our goal, one of the more severe things that happens with borderline personality disorders is cutting behaviors. So making tiny little cuts, usually in the upper thigh or the upper arm, and then, kind of precisely like taking care of it, but having like a whole little thing in which they kind of do like a ritualistic cutting as like their little part of who they are. That's someone who has more of a severe type of borderline personality disorder, usually, that does the cutting behavior. If that's what you're doing, then our goal of therapy is obviously to get you to stop doing that, self-harming, but also to kind of get you to not be so clingy to others and to kind of help you figure out to some extent who you are. So borderline, if you're really severe borderline, you're going to be pretty borderline most of your life. But it does tend to get less severe over time. Also, that comes with, therapy and figuring out, knowing who you are and that you do tend to do these things because it is part of your personality. It's difficult. One of my best friends has borderline personality disorder, and as kids, it was, kind of, interesting to deal with, especially as we were in our teenage years and early 20s, and she was driving me crazy. And then finally I figured out, like, oh, she's got borderline personality disorder. It also usually manifests in people who've had traumatic childhoods, parents who were alcoholics or drug abusers, things like that, more likely to show up with borderline personality disorder. So one of my good friends, who came from a family of alcoholism, very much had borderline personality disorder, and I kind of like conditioned it out of her as far as how she would act towards me. As anytime she would, start kind of being more borderliney towards me, I would just completely ignore her, and she kind of learned not to do it. And, she'd call me and be like, hey, let's go, to the bar tonight. I'd be like, oh, I can't, I got to study. Oh, I can't believe you got to pick that up on. She'd start going, and I would just hang up on her. I'd be like, nope. She would call back, blah, 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 hang up again. She called back again, I'm sorry. I'm like, okay, are we going to talk like normal people? All right. Like, I'm not going to play into that. But they tend to gravitate towards drama-filled people because that matches their personality. So because I'm not a drama-filled person, but I had been in her life since we were 10 years old, thankfully, like, I was more of a solid person in her life, and she could kind of listen to what I had to say to her and cared about what I thought about her. And so I was able to be kind of still to this day, more of like a stabilizing part of her life. And even now, we're in our 40s, and she'll call me every now and then, or text me and say, hey, I'm doing this, like, is this a borderline thing? And I'll be like, okay, well, tell me more, what's going on? And she'll say it, I'll be like, yeah, you're being kind of borderline, like, you need to, dial it back a little bit. Or I'll say, you know what, that's a normal, healthy way to think about this. It's okay to be mad about this, and this is why. And she'll be like, okay, thank you. Because she can't really tell sometimes if she's acting in a, kind of, quote unquote normal way or not. If she's kind of going into that, borderline way of thinking. All right, so those are kind of our two bigger personality disorders that a lot of people can kind of manifest. And guess what, everybody? Boom, we are done. I don't know why there's a picture of an eel.